Hey, I'm Shevener, and I wanted to share a little bit about my experience in managing pelvic organ prolapse and in working with Antony Lowe. Like a lot of people, it took a diagnosis of something. For me, it was prolapse, to have a better understanding of the importance of language and how crucial the way that we communicate with our clients, for instance, how important that is. And I think I knew that intellectually, but it really wasn't until I went through this experience that I felt it viscerally. I was diagnosed with prolapse around 14 months postpartum following a visit with my PT. Immediately following that visit, barely having left the office, I was on Google on my phone, and I was replaying all of the things that she had said in that appointment, and probably burning them into some part of my brain. And I found resources online that were very cautious, to the point of suggesting that the things that I loved to do, both personally and professionally, were now going to be off limits to me. I found very few resources actually that suggested that what I was dealing with would be something that I could manage, would be something that I would be able to keep in check while I did at least some extent of what I loved. Like I said, I've been in the fitness industry for a long time, and prior to that I was a dancer and lifting weights and strength training and being a high level of active person really meant a lot to me and was part of how I interacted with my community, and it was my job, and it was fun, and it was stress relief and a big part of my identity. And I felt like all of that was just being ripped to shreds when I would go online and read that, carrying my child or, picking up weights heavier than 10 pounds or doing pretty much everything I was doing at that point was going to make things worse, and that there was really no way around that. And that I was headed for this path of more symptoms and more severity and just doom and gloom. I found very few resources that were that had like a positive spin on them. There were some, but there were very few like success stories, or even someone who was saying, hey, this is a bummer, this is unfortunate, but I'm living with this and I'm doing okay. I found a lot of people that were really afraid, as I was, and that were really hurt by the lack of knowledge that they felt they had previously and by the information that they were receiving, which was, as I had found, pretty much confirming that the way that they were living their life and the activities that they wanted to do was inherently causing their problem or was going to make it worse. And this set me into a really dark place. It was a hard time in general. The first year of being a new parent had really taken its toll on me. I was working full time. And one of my biggest coping strategies has always been movement. And I felt like I had now lost that element. And I was afraid to move. I was afraid to work. I was afraid to really do anything. I spent all day, every day, researching my issues and looking on like surgery websites and downloading every picture I could find and sifting through forums and message boards and Facebook groups and just soaking in so much information that was all very focused on how awful, and this was, the worst case scenario. I saw that listed several times, and I just started to really live that feeling and internalize all of that, and it took over my life. And if I wasn't, on my phone looking at information, I was working with clients and afraid of, how could I train them when I have clearly done this to myself, and I should have known better, and there was a lot of guilt and shame and fear involved. It affected my ability to parent. It affected my marriage. It completely, just destroyed my self-esteem, and I didn't want to do anything except sit and research this like impending doom that was surely waiting for me at any given moment. My symptoms were significant. I felt like I couldn't do anything without feeling symptomatic, and it was just a really, really, really hard time. And around that time, Anthony came to San Francisco to present his Bulletproof the Pelvic Floor workshop, and I had been aware of his work and was really excited that he was coming out. And what I was probably even more excited about was that he was offering basically one-on-one meetings afterwards, and I immediately signed up for that. I went to the workshop and then met with him I think a couple days after that, and he told me a lot of information that I had seen before. We talked about a lot of things that I knew but hadn't really believed in quite a while, and did some movement strategy and talked about what I wanted. And he was the first person that asked me about what I actually wanted in terms of a physical goal. And I hadn't felt like anyone that I'd worked with previously in terms of PTs had really considered that I could even have a goal. I had given up on the idea that I could have a goal, and I had just focused on how I was ultimately going to get much worse, and I just had to save myself from becoming so drastically awful. But Anthony didn't, I didn't feel afraid to tell him that yeah, I want to swing kettlebells, and I want to lift weights, and I want to feel capable of doing things that, bring me joy or enable me to live my life in a way that I would like to be able to do. Things like just being able to pick up my kid. And then on top of that, the more recreational weightlifting aspirations that I had. And I left that meeting feeling the best I'd felt in months, and feeling like there was a chance that that this was not the end of the road for me, and that there was a glimmer of hope that, quite frankly, that I didn't believe existed since the time that I had been made aware of my prolapse. And he basically empowered me to trust myself and to become curious about myself. So not just kind of throwing caution to the wind entirely and just going for it, but getting curious about, well, what can I do? And how can I make elements of what I want to do work? And in a lot of ways, he told me to lift weights. He told me to do what I wanted to do, which pretty much everyone, and everyone being the internet and a few closer resources to me, had said not to. And I then saw a woman who had also gone to his course, who was a pelvic floor PT, who was a little bit more in line with ultimately what I wanted to do in terms of weightlifting. And I found her to be really encouraging, and she had very similar feelings and really encouraged me to try and to let go of some of that fear. And so I did. And I just started to play around with things that I knew how to do. And, I've been in the movement world for a long time. I know how to progress and I know how to regress. And, it was as if I had been paralyzed previously to even thinking of, breaking down a movement, for instance. I was just so stuck, and they gave me back a lot of clarity. And the ability to start to think about making decisions that felt a little bit more autonomous, and gave me confidence and trust in myself. And so I started to play. And I started to feel better. And so I started to play more. And I continued to feel better. And I started to learn more about pain and symptoms. And, you know, I was a psychology major. I mean, the brain is one of my favorite things to think about. And so I started to learn more about that and how powerful my perception of things was, and how much it mattered that I had support and that I had someone who could listen to me even briefly and say, you know, I hear you and I hear what you want to do, and, you know, I understand that, before immediately saying like, and it's never going to happen. And just that permission in some sense to be able to give myself permission was such a powerful gift. And I became much more confident, and still, you know, had ups and downs, and would still kind of second guess myself and get myself stuck in the internet and feel lost. But eventually I continued to work with the PT, and I kept in touch with Anthony and was obviously still absorbing his work, and I really made quite a bit of progress very quickly, much quicker than I ever anticipated. And it set me on this trajectory to continue to do that and to work in a capacity to allow for more discussion on prolapse. So not just saying, you know, it's the worst thing ever, you know, your life is over, and all of that information that I could find, and, you know, be cautious about every single thing that you're doing. But I wanted to create outlets for people like me who were active or wanted to be active, who were young, who didn't want to feel like they had to spend the rest of their life waiting for everything to fall apart or fall out. And so I created a group on Facebook called Pop Fitness, where I started to interact with people that, you know, were also on the same healing journey as I was. And I started approaching that attitude in my work, and I wrote about it, and I went to therapy, and I really did a lot of work on my mindset, more than I did on my, you know, specific pelvic floor exercises, which my pelvic floor function was not really the thing that was, you know, the biggest factor. I think it was my perception of my situation and how deeply I had attached myself to that. It had become my identity. And like my pelvic floor function I could work on. But when I was stuck in the idea that I was prolapse, there was, what do you do with that? And so I started to let go of the idea that I was prolapse and started thinking about how I was going to manage my prolapse and how I was going to choose things that I could do with having prolapse, but not because I have prolapse. And just those simple shifts that seem so innocuous made such a massive difference. And I'm so thankful that I was given, you know, that I had the ability to go to this course, that I had the ability to have a one-on-one conversation, and that I had this connection that really led me on a path back to myself. And I'm so appreciative of that. I think that's the best thing that you can do for someone. And I hope that in some capacity, the work that I'm now interested in doing with people has even a glimmer of that effect, because it's been a really wild ride, and I'm at the point now where, and I never would have said this 2 years ago, but the diagnosis of prolapse has been the best thing that's happened to my career, my social life in many ways, my marriage. I mean, it forced me to see things differently and to be open to seeing things differently. And I think that is really something that doesn't happen often. I think we don't always have those situations where we have the opportunity to really change our perspective and really evaluate if the way that we see things is actually, what we value. And the diagnosis of prolapse has forced me to reevaluate a lot of things and get really true to what I want and who I am, and has really set me on a very clear path in terms of career and how I can support people, and brought me much closer to a lot of people, which I wouldn't have had that experience without this. So, just the emotional, psychological side has been so powerful. And the other part of that is that I've been able to get back to a lot of the things that I never thought I would do. I passed 2 levels of RKC certification, so kettlebell certifications that are notoriously challenging for anybody, let alone someone who, like, God forbid, should not be swinging a kettlebell because they have prolapse. And I've been able to train in a way that feels really sustainable and sustaining, with a mindset that also feels sustaining and sustainable, and that just feels good. And I'm really in a good place right now, and I'm also in a place where I can acknowledge that things will not necessarily always be this good, because our bodies are always adapting, but I know that I have the support and the tools and the resources and the community and kindness and patience to be able to manage those things as they come. And I look forward to tackling that as that happens. So I hope that this was a helpful kind of conversation, and I love talking about it, and I love getting people's opinions and hearing about their experience and learning from them. So keep in touch, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.